Good evening, everyone. Welcome to class 3, which is all about theme. And I think it is quite appropriate that we are diving into theme on this new moon in Pisces. I shared a meditation with y'all earlier today. I'm sure only some of you have had a chance to listen to it if you're going to listen to it. But I talked a little bit about the themes of Pisces, a very watery sign, a sign that takes us into the deep, deep depths. And that is also what theme does for us. It's very hard to pin down. It's very expansive. It's very deep. There are so many facets we can explore in theme and so many ways that we can present a theme in a story. There are an endless number of possibilities. And so I just think it makes sense that we are discussing this on a Pisces new moon. So let's dive in. And I think I need to do this too. If you'll go to the 3 dots on your Zoom square and choose rename and add your pronouns for all of us. And then let me know in the chat something that you have discovered or something that you've learned about the world of your story since we last met. So last time we did some tarot around world building, and maybe you had some time to think about some of the things that came through. Maybe you had some time to write some scenes, write a scene, draw a picture of your world. I don't know. Tell me something that's come to you since the last class about the world of your story in the chat. And if you are not currently muted, if you would go ahead and mute yourself until we kind of share aloud. I learned that my character's lineage or family world, as I'm thinking of it, is more grounded than I believed. Okay, interesting. Gemma, does that mean that like it coincides more with our reality? You can come off mute if you want to.
I think it does coincide with our reality. And I think I just didn't know a lot about these characters, like my main character's mother and just the women in her world. And I needed to know something about them. And I was filling in the blanks with maybe my story. And so it was helpful to have a different story, like a different world surrounding them.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that what you're talking about articulates a feeling I have had so many times with stories I'm writing, where like I have a great exciting idea or something that feels really rich, or maybe I'll be coming into the story wanting to explore a certain theme, but I haven't really filled out the rest of it. And as I said at the beginning of this course, imagining like a fully realized world that you haven't ever been to is really, really difficult. So the more you can fill in those pieces that our imagination hasn't fully discovered yet, the more things can start to lock in place, and you really can feel like you're not just crafting something sort of vague in certain places and sharp in others. It all starts to come into a little bit more focus. So I am excited to hear that. Thank you for sharing. My story is set in the Rocky Mountains in summer. I had already mentioned wildfires as a factor in the setting, but I realized I needed to foreground them more. Cool. Carrie, I am curious if there was something in the tarot or something else that brought you to that realization.
Well, when I did my reading last week, the first week, as I had mentioned, I got just a lot of cups and a lot of water signs, and then last week I was getting a lot of wands, and all the wands are in this deck are drawn with very red and very dry and very, definitely more fire forward. So that was I was trying to figure out what that was all about, and I was like, yeah, no, these characters would be experiencing, smoke blowing in and possibly like even, flames in the distance and concerns about that. So
Awesome. Yeah, my suspicion, I wondered, did Carrie pull some wands? And turns out that was the case. So I like how you picked up on that signal and really brought them forward even more. Very cool. Let's see. I was able to discover a supporting character, shared a cultural background with my main character. Christy, how did that show up for you?
I just, in thinking more about the world, kind of the mining camp world, and I had to think more about the women there and why they would form a connection and how they would understand each other and kind of look out for each other. So that kind of helped me to go back and to see where my main character was really coming from, and then to kind of find a connection between two characters and their, in their past and their culture, and how it would make sense, how they would kind of recognize those things in each other in this very kind of angry, hard place.
Wow, that is awesome. It sounds like you saw something going on in the cards, and then you decided to like sort of backtrack with some more questions that would help you piece that together. And I love that you did that. I encourage everyone to do that if you're not already. Like, I give you a lot of different spreads and possibilities, but and perhaps everyone here has already realized this, but like, this is an organic process for you. And when you have questions, you can turn to the cards with, any question that you're holding. So I love how you went back and really got like excavated more. And it sounds like you've created this really beautiful tension between a really hard world and finding connection and commonality, which sounds like it might feed into the theme situation that we're going to talk about tonight. Awesome. Thank you, Christy. More conflict in the past that informs the story and conflict going forward. Rich, do you want to say a little bit about how that showed up for you?
Yeah, so I think actually in both of the classes, the way I write is usually kind of a visual image of one scene. Sometimes it's the ending, sometimes it's the beginning. And it's just a situation, and I work off of that, which can obviously get you frozen and for quite some time. So yeah, just having the ability to reflect on like what happened before and what happened around, to actually build the future story has been useful.
Okay, was that kind of like the past and the deep past kind of thing?
A little bit of both. The story I'm working on was pretty shallow to begin with, so I picked the most shallow story. Yeah, so it worked. I think it's working out so far, and I dropped out in the middle of the last session and didn't get a chance to follow through entirely. So
Yeah,
still pretty shallow.
cool. Yeah, but finding out those tensions in the past can really show us some new through lines into other times in the story. So that is great to hear. Brooke says, I thought I had one world, but then realized that my characters are actually existing in several worlds because of the way the story is structured, since they are on different movie sets, etc. Brooke, do you want to tell us a little bit about what showed up for you or how that kind of unlocked?
Yeah, actually, initially, because the story's set in LA, with these two people who are extras, and so I thought, oh, I just have one world. And so when I was thinking about the world, I was thinking about like the city, and that's not the case at all. So they're actually like feeding off of the energies around them and these different sets that they're working through. And so I think what I'm going to do this weekend is go back through last week's recording and kind of do the spreads again and see what comes up, because I've been in a big planning phase. So now that I have like a couple chapters and I kind of have some better direction, it's like, oh, I need to go back and do this again. So that's kind of what I'm thinking to do.
I love that discovery because I think you said that your two extras are like, they always get assigned jobs on the same sets and they kind of don't get along, but they also end up falling in love, and like they're in this space of performance. They're in these worlds that are constructed and for like a fictional purpose. And so there's like a meta story going on, but within each, like sometime, one time they're in an office setting and one time they're in, it could be like a jungle or, whatever, but like you can really heighten the experience and the environment and the fun, like the humor and the tension through the changing of the worlds. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Kat says, I realize that the human world intrudes into the wild more than I realized. It's never completely wild. Kat, will you talk a little bit about how you've found that realization?
It was in the it was in the work that we did last week, that where I suddenly realized that it's like an Eden Disneyland, a Disneyland version of Eden. And I hadn't really thought about, I think there's a writer named Helen MacDonald. She wrote H is for Hawk, which is a really fantastic memoir about her father's death. Anyway, she's a brilliant nature writer. And she says one of the most important things in her advice to nature writers is don't leave out don't pretend it's pre-industrial. Don't leave out, it's like when you're taking a photo, don't try to move to crop out the telephone pole, which I always do. So I think I was kind of mentally cropping out some telephone poles, not that there are actual telephone poles, but you know what I mean? And I think that will add to the like tension and poignancy of the situation.
Yes, that is a really good insight. And Kat and I have talked about this novel she's writing before, and it's largely about a young girl who like was from the wild and ends up growing up in civilization, and she's sort of navigating between those two worlds as she comes into adulthood, as I'm understanding it, Kat. And then so I know a lot of the emphasis has been on like what's out there in nature and what it represents for her, but you're so right, like this human societal part of it is also interacting with nature and probably trying to dominate it or eradicate it or having impacts on it. So that seems like such an important thing to invoke, and also something that will come up tonight in themes, perhaps. Thank you, Kat. And Tamiko says, I learned where my character is at the beginning of the story, which I didn't know before, a small island off the coast of Maine. Tamiko, would you be willing to talk about how that came up for you?
In the spread, the underworld, I pulled the King of Cups, and I was just thinking, I'm just in the beginning stages of imagining this novel. So there's a lot of stuff that's very fuzzy for me. And I think the world was the most, like, I hadn't really thought about the world very clearly before last week's class, including like, where's the character? Like I know where she ends up, but I hadn't really like defined where she begins. And it was after, I think it was a couple days afterwards where I was thinking about the spread. And then I was like, oh, of course, it's this island that I was on in January when like I got the message that like I really needed to start working on this book. And I'm like, of course, that's where she starts the story. So
awesome. Yes. You mentioned at the start of class that your novel would be very watery. So it's very cool to see the King of Cups in the underworld part, like as kind of like the underworld Poseidon of the place, which immediately connects you to an oceanside place that's important to you. I love that. Thank you for sharing, everyone. This is very exciting to hear that there's new revelations, new insights you can carry forward. So let's dive into theme. Though I should ask, are there any questions about world building that you want to address or that you want to pose before we dive in? Should have said this sooner. Okay. If you think of any, if you have them, put them in the chat. So dreamy, themey, which does tie theme, I feel like, to the Pisces energies. Pisces is a very dreamy sign. So theme is perhaps the most abstract and unwieldy and hard to pin down of all the story elements. So we know, like characters get pretty specific. They have bodies, they move around, they operate in the way that we do, generally speaking. And at the same time, well, and worlds are very specific. They have like places and locations and all kinds of details that we can use to fill out the world. The rest of our story might be like scene writing, dialogue writing, but theme is really like the giant abstract part that's being channeled into the story. So in one sense, it's very abstract, very unwieldy, hard to kind of like nail down. And at the same time, theme can be very simple because it is such a big archetype, a big abstract idea. There's something quite simple about that, even while it's also very complicated. So it's a little bit of a paradox, and humans love a good paradox. We really use art to try and explore the things that confound us. And I feel if we're going to undertake the work of writing, if we're really caring about our stories, then it's important for us as writers, it's part of our jobs, to go into this realm of theme and explore what it is that we're working with. So free pass to the theme park. That was a really lame joke I thought of before class started. So if you think in kind of reductive terms about theme, or like maybe if you asked a third or fourth grader what a theme might be, not to insult third or fourth graders, they are really awesome, but they might think of something like a punchline or the moral of a story or something like a fable, where like in The Tortoise and the Hare, for example, we learned that the fastest one isn't always the winner necessarily, right? There's like a lesson. And theme is not quite that. Theme is much more expansive, a much bigger idea. And in this way, it actually has a lot to do with tarot. And I think a lot of what we're channeling as we use tarot to explore our stories is this big landscape of theme and how it's going to manifest into the story. I think theme is sometimes intimidating and maybe a little bit misunderstood in terms of like what it means for you as a writer. As writers will often look for all kinds of reasons that they shouldn't be writing a particular story. And sometimes there are reasons that we shouldn't be writing a particular story, cultural appropriation being one of them. But in this case, I was thinking in particular of writers I've heard kind of say like, this is such a huge theme. It's been written about a million times. Who am I to write another story about this theme? But the thing is that themes are so big and so expansive that there's a limitless number of stories that can be written. And we take theme in our stories and we animate it. We make it really particular. It comes to life through the characters and their reactions and the way that they navigate this theme. And each of us is creating certain kinds of characters from our own particular perspectives and experiences. And so whatever you craft, unless you fail to kind of get above the fundamentals or the basics or the most simple version of the theme, once you sail past that, you're going to be creating a story about this theme that is unique and has not been written in quite this way before. So I just offer that in case you ever catch yourself saying something like that to yourself, like, we come to these themes and we write about them and we make art about them because they are mysterious and so expanded to us. Like we want to know them better. And the way that we try to do that is through art. So don't stop yourself. In this class, I'm going to reference this book a little bit. Janet Burroway, her book, Writing Fiction, A Guide to Narrative Craft. It was a book I was given in my MFA program. And I think if you're like really new to fiction, it can be very helpful. It really helps you like think of these different elements separately. It gives you some examples to look at and some activities. So that's something you might, if you like what she's talking about here, you might just add that to your list. So Janet Burroway says, theme is what a story is about. And like at first glance, if you ask a writer what their story is about, they'll say, my story is about a shop clerk who lives in a little neighborhood and is getting really bored with her life and she wants something exciting to happen. So that is what the story is about, but a story is also like about an abstraction is what she's saying. It's not just what the character in this particular situation is doing or what it's about, but the abstraction that the story is about. So in our fiction, we create containers where these abstractions of theme can play out and be particularized through the perspectives of our characters. And that last part is really important because theme is so big. If you think about the theme of love or the theme of death, like there's so many things we can say. And there are some cliche and simple things we can say about love or death or any particular theme. But what makes themes start to become interesting and specific is when our characters are interacting with it. I think there's a typo in that last paragraph. But let's take a little bit more from Janet Burroway. She says, a story is also about an abstraction. And if the story is significant, that abstraction may be very large. Yet thousands of stories have been written about love, other thousands about death, and still other thousands about both love and death. And to say this is to say little about the theme of any of them. So we might have all these stories about love and death, but each one is going to be saying something a little bit different. We might better understand theme if we ask the question, what about what it's about? What does the story have to say about the idea or abstraction that seems to be contained in it? What attitudes or judgments does it imply? Above all, how do the elements of fiction contribute to our experience of those ideas and attitudes in the story? So the characters will be having their own interactions with the theme. And based on what you know about the characters and how much you trust them or identify with them, and your reaction to the way the events of the story take place, you're going to have your own interaction and reaction to the themes that are being animated in the story. And this is how our minds get expanded. This is how books really have a powerful impact. So I would love to hear from y'all. Take a minute to write down somewhere on your paper one of the themes in your story, write it in big capital letters. It might be just one or two words, and then type it in the chat. Okay, we have growth, power structures, and rebellion, breakdown of dualities, and each of those two dualities probably represent two different themes as well, perhaps. the theme is articulated as who wins. So that could be a theme around power. It could be around what winning means. Agency. Can two people who have never experienced love fall in love? Yes. So like the larger theme is love. And then this Brooke story in particular is going to ask, can two people who've never experienced love fall in love? And legacy. Okay, great. Thank you all. All right. So now that you have this theme on your paper, begin listing some questions and statements that you think the story could make, is making, or will make at some point around this theme. List as many as you can, even if you're not sure whether or not they will actually appear or play out in the story. So the way that Brooke posited her theme, saying, can two people who have never experienced love fall in love? That would be one kind of question to spin off the theme of love. So, but there are probably more questions about love that Brooke's story is raising. So I'm going to give you 4 minutes and see if you can add, maybe try to write down at least 5 questions that are coming, that could possibly be spun off from this theme. And once you get 5, please type one of them in the chat. take another 30 seconds or so to add maybe one more question and share that question in the chat. And seeing how is love connected to the idea of nature versus nurture? It's a great question. Is it biological? Is it societal? It's both. How can we, which one will doom us or help us succeed? Who gets to decide the fate / future of the planet and all beings on it? Where does the hope and courage to rebel against a socially accepted power structure come from? Great question. When growth is not linear, what is achieved? Excellent. In this game, which is life, eating, being eaten, killing, dying, which you must play, how can you win if everything you are connected to, everything that feeds you, loses? Wow. Is there really such a thing as unnatural? I just read a quote about this today. Where did I see this? In an email by another writer, actually, a resource that I'm going to share with everyone later on. Any others? Did everyone get a chance to share? Okay, these are great questions. And I think having these questions around or nearby or referencing them from time to time can help you. It's not like every single scene in your story needs to focus on an exploration of the theme, though it might end up being that way, but it doesn't have to be top of mind for you constantly. But it can be a point of reference, a guidepost for you as you continue developing characters, structuring your story, figuring out the plot. Coming back to these questions can help you decide, like, is this relevant? Is this furthering the exploration, or is it deviating? So, theme in action, as I have done in the other two classes, comparing different elements to parts of the body. Our characters were, gosh, I can't remember now. I know that our worlds were, our characters are the beating heart. Our worlds are the skeleton, the musculature, the structure, and our theme is like the blood coursing through the body. It's very much in the background. It's not something we think about all the time. We never really end up like interacting with it in the same way that like we can see our feet and our legs and we can't see it in the mirror, right? It's in the background, hopefully, if it's not, something has gone wrong and we should see a doctor. But sorry, I take this metaphor too far. Theme is there in the background, fueling the story, keeping it going, and it becomes animated, as I think I've already said, through the way the characters respond to it. So through their perspectives, through their experiences, and the decisions they make. So the questions that your story is raising, like some of the questions that you've placed in the chat, will show up. They'll never be like posited in a line of dialogue. They will never be written by you into the story in the form that you have articulated them here. They're going to become animated. They're going to like come into play, and the story will be about the investigation of this question through all kinds of different movements, speech, thoughts, feelings, reactions. So it's through the points of view of the character that the themes begin to animate, and particularly the parts of us that make us human or differentiate us as far as we know from other living creatures on Earth, is our logical function, our emotional function, which other animals have, and also the judgmental function, which I think only humans are capable of. So through these different things, we see the theme start to take place, to take shape, and these questions that we're raising get played out. You will probably not, I mean, maybe at some point in the story, these questions will be answered in one particular way. So like to come back to Brooke's question, I'm gonna go back to the original one. Can two people who have never experienced love fall in love? We will find out in the course of her story whether these two people who have never experienced love can fall in love. And so the answer will be yes or no to a question like that. But we will also wonder, like, does this mean it's true for everyone? Does this mean it's true for me? And so even the answer to that question and the way that that answer is arrived at in the story will bring up even more questions in the reader that will give each reader a particular experience around the theme. So if we take this love example, if love is a theme in a story, we can imagine love kind of manifesting into the story in one instance, for example, in the form of like an attractive, friendly, warm, and flirty person that our character is going to encounter on the way to the grocery store, on the way to the coffee shop. I'll refer to this flirty, warm, attractive person as Cutie Pie. And let's say our character comes into the coffee shop and there's Cutie Pie, you know, opening the door for this person and offering like a very cute smile with a sparkle in their eye. And the character starts to feel a welling of joy up inside them. So this is their emotion. They're having a reaction to this symbol of potential love. But when he feels this spark of joy, because of his lived experience, his thoughts jump in to tell him that there's no point in feeling joy right now. No, don't get any sparkles. Don't light the sparkles because it's just not gonna last. Like you can't sustain it. This is where logic comes in to tell the character a story about the emotion that he's feeling. The story continues. Once the joy is gone, because as I've said, it's fleeting, you'll just go back to being miserable. More logic. And so you're foolish to even allow, like, how could you even let yourself feel this sparkle in the first place just because this Cutie Pie opened the door for you? What a fool. And that is judgment. So because all of this is the character's constitution, their experience, their personality. So these are the reactions they have to the Cutie Pie who symbolizes love. At this point, the character then averts their eyes while Cutie Pie is saying hi and opening the door, and this moment of opportunity then passes forever. And so we see this character turn away from love because it's too risky, it's too fearful, it's foolish in this case. And so I think you've done a good job articulating your questions, but would a couple of people offer a question that maybe a scene like this would raise about love? You can unmute yourself if you want to. Is love real anyway? Yes. Right, because our character just feels like love is an illusion. This is just kind of usually like a bait and switch situation. Can love last? If love transmutes into something else, is it worthwhile? Right. Great question. So should we chance it? Should we risk it, right? Many romance stories will explore this question. So this is also from Janet. She writes that literature attempts to fuse these three areas of experience organically, and she's referring to emotion, logic, and judgment, denying the force of none of them, positing that no one is more real than the other. So these parts of ourselves, this emotional part, the logical part, both of those are shown in tarot, right? In the cups, the emotions, and with the swords, the thoughts, the logic, and also judgment for that matter. That's where judgment comes from, is our thinking. And that none is more real than the other, and none is more powerful than the other. They all work in tandem. They are all part of the human experience. So she writes, this is why I have insisted throughout her whole book on writing The Craft of Fiction on detail and scene, the immediate felt experience, the essential abstractions conveyed therein, the ideas, and the attitude implied thereby, the judgment. Theme is made up of every element of fiction in this book, or every element of fiction this book has discussed. The arrangement, shape, and flow of the action as performed by the characters, realized in their details, seen in their atmosphere from a unique point of view through the imagery and rhythm of the language. It is in the different uses of the elements of fiction that each story makes unique what it has to say about and what attitude it takes toward the idea of the theme. So she says it more eloquently than I have been. And actually, this is wrongly attributed. This should be going to George Saunders, who also has a newsletter that I'm going to recommend to everyone. But he talks about the questions that a story raises. And he writes, we may think of the writer of a good story as a creative, energetic detective we're following around. We admire her energy and efficient method. We marvel at the quickness of her mind and the soundness of her instincts. And then he adds, by the way, I don't think we generally know what question the story is asking when we start writing. I don't anyway. Usually I'm writing in an attempt to blunder into that question. So just to focus on this a moment longer, as I mentioned, the theme is probably part of what's drawing you to write the story in the first place. Like, you have questions about this theme. You have felt the conundrums of this theme playing out in your life, and your willingness to write about it is part of your own self-discovery and part of like your developing relationship with this theme. So it's through the writing process that we begin to see more and more what it is exactly that we're exploring. We can't simply like think and think and think about it and wait for ourselves to figure it out before we start writing. Like, writing is part of the thinking process. It is, of course, recursive. It takes us back to new ideas, and then we keep writing, and that points out new things, and then we revise, we come back, it all feeds itself. So we're going to start with a theme in your story and start working with the cards. And I would like for you to start by taking the deck and holding all the cards face up, like you get to actually look at them all. And you can use the theme that you have already started with so far, but look for a card that represents a theme in your story. And I'm going to take you through, as we talk about this, I'll take you through an example that I did with my stories. You can sort of see what I mean. One of the themes in my erotic comic is community. So this couple of sex magicians, I've imagined them living on the edge of town where they can get into, they can get some conveniences. There is a social order in the world of the story, but they also live on the edges where they're more isolated, a little more protected, like not so many people in their business. And they have a deeper connection to nature and any of the wild things that may be living in the area. But part of the work that they do on the like up and up that engages with the social order is about like, has a communal aspect. And then they're also using their magic to like heal and unify the community. So community was a theme that I wanted to work with. And so I picked up the Six of Pentacles. In the Rider Waite version, you'll see more of a community aspect. I think community comes out more clearly in that card, but here you can see the celebration of two figures coming together. So similarly, choose a card that represents a theme in your story, and I would love for you to put that card in the chat. I know there's a lot of cards, so take your time. Okay, Five of Pentacles, being cut off from paradise. Yes, like a theme of isolation, marginalization, being out in the cold, being ostracized. Ten of Swords, so a theme of great anxiety and worry. some kind of crisis, possibly. Six of Thunder makes me think that is Six of Swords, Six of Air. I'm not sure about that one, Gemma. The Lovers. Two seemingly separate things becoming mingled and harmonized. Cool. I also think about the Lovers not just as like the two, but also the third entity that the two create. Okay, yeah, Six of Swords. So like a theme of journey, travel, movement, leaving something behind to go toward the future. And keep looking for your card if you're still looking for that. If you've already found yours, now take the deck and use the cards as you normally would, with all of them facing away from you, and choose two more at random, asking, what are some other themes in my story? Someone else has chosen the Fool, so leaping into the unknown, taking a risk. Nine of Pentacles, possibly a theme of like autonomy, independence, comfort, pleasure, enjoyment. We'll just choose two cards to show you two other possible themes. So you've chosen one, and then choose two, number 2 and 3. And when you have those two cards, take a minute to write down some thoughts about what those themes could represent. So I will share mine with you. One of them was the sun. And this one felt easy to connect with, or leapt out at me as having something to do with like, how can my characters and what they do together create more like light and joy and radiance and a kind of innocence in the world around them. And then the third card I pulled was the Two of Swords, the Two of Voices in this deck. And this is a card of kind of being at a crossroads, or I took this to mean, especially because there's a kind of like overlapping in this card, almost like there's a mirror image being formed. So this made me think of the living in two worlds that is going on with my characters. Like they live in the world of the mundane, interacting with society. They have, I think one of them is going to run like a nursery, and maybe one of them is a carpenter. It's not clear yet, but they sell things and they offer things to the community. So they have these like commerce transactions with people, in addition to interacting with them on a personal level when they have customers. But then they have this magical realm that they operate in as well. And they're both like connected to the social world and connected to nature, which is where a lot of their magic will come from. And so another theme that I identified pulling this card was like, how do you walk between two worlds? Like, how can you navigate that? Can you still be a full person when you have to kind of be one in one world and one in another? And once you have all three, I would like for you to choose which one you want to work with for the rest of our time together. I chose the Two of Voices because it brought my attention to a part of the story that to me feels very rich. And these other two do as well. And this wasn't the card I consciously chose. This is one of the random ones. So this one to me was really interesting. And so I continued to work with it with this spread. But once you have the theme you're working with tonight, will you please put it in the chat by telling me the tarot card and the theme if you can. or if you will. You know, a question on Queen of Pentacles meaning. So I would say Queen of Pentacles is a very like nurturing, nature connected person, someone who's very grounded, that provides kind of comfort and support through a really steady energy that like comes from the earth, like that really steady life force, balanced, soft, not, I don't mean soft, I mean more like sturdy, maybe quiet, but sturdy. But also, of course, pay attention to what you see in that card. Okay, we have death. It actually looks like climate change, the dying land and dying people, the emptiness of the bishop's preaching, and also a vast, deep change. Okay, death. We're going for the big ones. The Hanged Man for the theme of what does it take to change your perspective? Good. Someone else also had Queen of Pentacles, and is going to work with that card. Theme, steadiness, acceptance. Meet others. Also Queen of Pentacles, the path toward leaving her present powerless situation will be over the mountains in the wild. Okay, I love that. Christy, that makes me think of the book Women Who Run with the Wolves. And then the Hermit was one of the random cards because of the willingness to walk away from one's normal life to acquire new hidden knowledge is something a lot of the characters are dealing with. Okay. Awesome. So you've selected your theme, and we're going to pull two more cards to ask about two tensions that may come up in relation to this theme. Someone else has chosen Eight of Pentacles, thinking about mastery. So for my two cards, my two tensions, I had, and this is for Two of Voices, which I took as, again, those like existing in and navigating two different worlds. So the first card I pulled was the Justice card, which is something my characters are very interested in and part of the reason that they practice magic. And the other card was the Two of Cups. So you see these like two figures coming together. And Two of Cups to me is about mutual respect, everyone being dignified, a kind of equitable relationship. And so I think as the characters try and navigate this world of magic and society, and also society and nature, and kind of living outside of society while also trying to participate in it and heal it, justice seems like a really important question that's going to come up. Like they're bound to encounter wrongdoers or harm doers or evil incarnate perhaps. And so if they are people who believe in unconditional love and who believe that like love can heal, and who actually make magic through their love making. How can they, if they're trying to create a world where everyone in the community has equity, has dignity, and yet they encounter harm doers, can they bring this like love and dignity into the really hard places where justice needs to be grappled with, right? Like, we ask for justice, we demand justice, we want justice, but putting justice into practice in a human kind of container or dynamic gets really messy and difficult. And so the characters, I think, are very much going to struggle with that. So this is what I mean when you pull these two cards and look at the tensions. You want to be asking yourself, like, how are these two things contrasted with each other? How are they in conflict with each other? So take a minute to pull those cards, write some notes. And I suspect that maybe some of y'all will have cards that are confusing, or you don't see the contrast, or you're not sure how they're talking to each other. So I'm going to also open the floor for people to share their two tension cards and ask any questions about that. So I'll give you some time, and also you can come off mute as you need to, want to. Okay, someone has a 10 of Cups card. It says, doesn't seem like a tension card. What is your other card, however?
My other card is the Emperor.
Okay, there's your tension. So 10 of Cups is like enjoying the moment, being fully present, relishing the simple pleasures. Sometimes that card has a family outside, like throwing its arms up at the rainbow, because the rainbow, they know, is only temporary. So they're going to stop working or whatever they were doing, and they're going to go celebrate. But the Emperor does not have time for these kinds of things. He cares about order. He cares about structure, not frivolity. And so there you have a tension between, like, is enough work getting done? Is society like have the things it needs? Are people like doing their part versus do people have time to enjoy themselves? Things like that.
Thank you.
Yes. Ace of Pentacles, the endless rebirth, endless new promise of the physical world, versus Six of Pentacles, which feels so human to me, controlled, not mutual, give and take. Only I give, you only take. Yes, that's a beautiful tension. So Ace of Pentacles is like the seed, this ever replenishing idea of like beginning, and something we sort of look to the earth for. Like the earth can maintain itself. It's a sustainable container without, if you take out human intervention, right? But Six of Pentacles is about using resources to be in transaction, to use control, to hoard power. And so you have like the potential of all this resource and replenishing versus what can happen to it when it is in the hands of some people who are, or a society who's greedy and unsatiable, right? Any other people with tensions where you're not like seeing it, not sure what it means? Okay. Curious about the Page of Swords as the tension card for Queen of Pentacles. Yeah, so the Queen has more maturity, we could say, like more experience, perhaps more years lived, but not necessarily. We can all be pages at any point in our life. We can all be queens at any point in our life. But the Queen of Pentacles, with that relationship to the earth, has kind of a steadier connection to what's below, to the natural world, drawing on those like rhythms to really hold a lot of trust and provide that in a nurturing way. And then the Page of Swords is someone who's like captivated by an idea and wants to like study and learn. And it's kind of like the appetite of the Renaissance, like science and learning and figuring out like how the world works, versus Queen of Pentacles being like, I sense how the world works. I see it working all around me. I don't need to necessarily like know the mechanics of every mechanism I'm seeing. I know that it has its own logic that I can sense. So it's kind of like two ways of knowing or experiencing. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. So we're going to carry those tensions into our next bit. Hopefully you've written a little bit about this. Okay, we've done this. Actually, revisit your questions, because you may have changed themes since we started. And I would like for you to take a few more minutes to write down some questions and statements that seem relevant to you around this theme. If it's the same thing you were working with, maybe a new question or two pops up. If it's a new one, it might be easier to think of some questions. We'll just take like 2 minutes to add some questions there. Okay. Let's continue on. Now we're going to take this theme we've been working with and start to question and look at how it might animate through the emotion, logic, and judgment of a character. So these are the last 3 cards we're going to pull tonight for this exercise, and this is our last exercise with the cards tonight. But I want you to think about this tarot spread as a particular point in time in your story. So your character is not going to have the same emotion, logic, and judgment to the theme at the beginning of the story as they will at the end, because stories are about change. They're about a change in perspective. They're about gaining new knowledge. They're about a character making a decision to live in one way or another, despite their fear, despite what society tells them, or because of what society tells them. They can make any choice, but they need to make some kind of choice or have some kind of new awareness and do something with that awareness usually. So their emotions, logic, and judgment are bound to evolve. That's something you want to see. So when we pull these cards, you may not know which particular point in time these cards are talking about. Your job will be to like imagine the point in time, or just imagine a specific point in time where this emotion, logic, and judgment could be present in relationship to the theme. So I'll show you my example. And again, my theme was that notion of walking between two worlds, and my tensions were the justice card, like how can you create a just society or a just community and make sure that you dignify and honor everyone, even sometimes the people who end up doing harm, treating them like humans as well. And I don't think my characters are going to become like sympathizers, but I think this is a place where their moral fortitude will be tested. So in terms of emotion, I was thinking specifically about like one of the characters, and I'll want you to do this too, is to focus on one single character, their emotion, logic, and judgment in a particular moment related to my theme of navigating two worlds with this tension that I just described. So my character's emotion is 5 of materials, or 5 of pentacles, which is a card of feeling scarcity, not enough resources, feeling shut out in the cold, feeling marginalized. And so I think my character, confronted with this responsibility of navigating these tensions, is going to feel initially inadequate or ill-equipped or not fully prepared to really like grapple with these tensions in a responsible way. And as sex magicians, as I've made them to be, they are not necessarily in a like, there's probably not a vast community of sex magicians in their community that they can turn to like figure these things out. So by virtue of what they've chosen to do, they've also placed themselves on the fringes of society where they alone have to navigate this together. In terms of logic, I had the 5 of voices, or 5 of swords, which is really where like self-sabotage comes in. And so I could see my character just immediately start telling themselves like, I am going to make a huge mistake. Like there's a lot at stake here. I can't get this wrong, except I'm probably going to. And so once you start telling yourself that you're going to get it wrong, you start to shut down the possibility that you might get it right, which only creates more conflict. And then this one was a little trickier, but for judgment, I had the 2 of materials, and you might recognize this like image of someone juggling 2 pentacles and doing it rather gracefully with some bit of like joy or magnanimity. And so in terms of judgment, I was like, I never really associated this card with any kind of judgment. But in relation to these tensions, the judgment that might come would be like, you don't know how to navigate these 2 things. Like you've bit off way more than you could chew, and you thought that you were capable of like handling this really heavy duty kind of like human existential question, but in fact, you are not ready or prepared to do any of this. So in this case, like the logic, the emotion, and the judgment really all work together to put the character in a huge place of self-doubt. So this made me think in my erotic comic that like at some point this villain shows up and it's creating a lot of pressure. There's some kind of like dark, not necessarily a dark force. There's some kind of force that's causing trouble, making, putting the community at risk, putting the environment at risk. I haven't figured this out yet, but it comes to a point where the characters are going to need to like confront something or navigate this and try to not just like eliminate the perpetrator necessarily, but bring some of their action into light and also try to move it into a place of healing, because that's what they're about. So when confronted with this like higher level challenge around all of this, the character looks like in this particular case is really in a place of like serious questioning, doubting, and judgment. So that's how those three can work together. That was maybe a long explanation, but I hope it helps illustrate what I'm talking about. So the scene this brings up for me is something like later in the story, that the character is going to have to overcome all of this doubt and really step forward and embrace the responsibility and trust herself, which is what making magic is about. So that's how I could kind of tell that it might be a later scene. So this is just to say, like, this is one point in time, but you don't have to know necessarily right away which point in time it is. I will stop talking now and make sure you have space to pull your cards and take some notes about that. When you have had time, please put 1, 2, and 3, your cards, in the chat. Okay. Got some coming in. Swords. Give folks a few more minutes and then we'll talk about some of these. Okay, does anyone want to talk a little bit about what you are seeing in the cards and what's confusing for you? Kat? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I pretty much get where I'm going with the first two, but the Fool in the Judgment place is a little surprising to me, and I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
I mean, I have some theories, but I'm not quite sure.
Okay, so let's start with your emotion card, which is the 10 of Pentacles. And what did you first, what's your theme?
I'm working with the theme that I randomly drew of kind of willingness to walk away from prior connections and society to pursue knowledge, which kind of is the Fool already, but I'm not sure that feels too literal, kind of, for what's going on here.
So your theme has something to do with like staying in the familiar world versus seeking more knowledge. Okay, so then
Yeah.
For an emotion, you have 10 of Pentacles. How did you read that in relation to the theme?
Well, my particular deck, I've got this image here of it's sort of a pack of wild dogs, or maybe jackals, or even very skinny wolves. I'm not quite sure. But it looks, given everything else that's going on in my novel, I was kind of getting a chosen family, and how this group that my main character has met is kind of drawing him to this path of going off from his former life into this new pursuit of knowledge. And he really wants to do it because he feels connected to them.
Okay, so he has a connected feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then in the logic spot, you have the Hanged Man. So something's happening in his mind about this connection, perhaps. What do you make of that?
Well, the thing that's interesting for me about that is that I have a character who's super already, I had kind of mapped a Hanged Man theme onto this character, and that character has become one of my main character's lovers. So that kind of reinforces the first, the thing I'm getting from the Pentacles, and that I'm, it's another connection to this new community and renunciation of his old life, that he's making this kind of bond in this new context.
Yeah, and it sounds like this lover represents like a different perspective, another way of being in the world, which could only be found by leaving the character's society. So the logic is like, oh, there's another world out here, or there's not just maybe one, there might be more. And then you have the Fool as the judgment. So it seems like things are going kind of groovy, like feeling connected, feeling, seeing like some perspective open up. So in terms of judgment, do you think the character is having, or like, what do you make of the Fool so far?
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately the conscious decision and judgment call to fully embrace this sort of path of going with this group and not, back to the old life is, like I said, that feels like a very literal reading, but it's also like kind of right there. So
Sometimes the cards will be very literal with you, and it's kind of funny when they do that, and cute, amusing. I don't know, you can take it however you want, but like, yeah, it may be that all these great things are happening in a, like, feeling connection, having this new perspective, but there may still be a part that's like, are you crazy for running away from everything you've ever known and going into a world where you know nothing? And can you really trust these people? And like, what kind of leap are you really taking? So even though these new positive experiences and feelings and thoughts are showing up, some part of the ego may also be surfacing to be on the lookout for like suspicious activity or reasons not to trust or reason to make oneself think that they're a fool for trying this, so that there's a little bit of a war inside. Does that
yeah, that I mean, that really fits with what I've already got. So I mean, if I'm on the right track, that's cool.
Yeah, so this may be have you written this scene yet?
This is kind of the scene I'm on the cusp of, or in the middle of it, in the sense that, the finding the community and the lover and everything have already happened, but there's going to be some events that throw a lot of doubt on things that are coming right up. So
okay, so the cards are really taking you to the place where you're currently working through the story. So that's exciting. They're kind of on track with you, and yeah, we'll be writing a little bit before we finish up, so it'll be like, how can you kind of show some of this emotion and these thoughts and the judgments through the activity of the scene. Thank you for sharing that, Carrie. Is there someone else who would like a little help or a little time to share? Places where you're scratching your head. Kat, you mentioned kind of being confused about the judgment part. Is there more I can say about that?
Yeah, it's interesting, this reading. These were both in my first character reading. The Seven of Cups was her waking mind, and the Lovers was her in that moment, which in my mind was the beginning of the story when I did the character reading.
That was her in the present moment, was the Lovers.
Right.
Okay. And what was Seven of Cups again? Sorry.
Her waking mind.
Waking mind. Okay.
So this feels like her maybe at the beginning of the story. And Knight of Cups, I really can kind of feel as like a full heart, wanting to move forward and offer.
And that's your emotion card. You have Knight of Cups.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then Logic, Seven of Cups. Like, I mean, I can see that as a confusion of possibilities and what will happen and that kind of thing. The Lovers is just a card that always puzzles me a little. And also, I'm not sure what judgment means, even though you've now talked about it twice. I'm so sorry.
So logic is where, in this case, like you take something. So in the example of the character and the cutie pie, the character's logic is that this woman or this cutie pie is not acting this way because they think that you're in any way special. Like, this is an accident. That's their logic. And then the judgment is like how that is taken to mean something about someone. And in this case, like, I sort of turn the judgment back onto the character, where it's like, you're an idiot to even think that this cutie pie would be friendly or flirty with you. So it's where something like, yeah, a value judgment comes into the picture on top of the logic.
It has a
So
quality of decision.
what's that?
There's a quality of decision.
Yes, like you commit to sort of a meaning.
Right.
And that commitment to a meaning will change the way that you act or inform the way that you act. So I do think you have a little bit of a conundrum when your judgment, the character's judgment is the lovers. And so I'm thinking about that too. Like if their emotion is this Knight of Cups trying to like follow the heart or, you know, believing in a kind of like heartfelt destiny or connection. And then the logic is Seven of Cups, which would make sense. Like when you start to follow your heart, you start to get confused because you're like, am I listening to the right thing here? Should I be listening to my mind, my heart, other people? I don't know what's happening. Why are there so many choices? How do I know which one to choose? And the judgment being the lovers, I wonder if there's a kind of like subversion of judgment in this potential where it's like I need connection or there's something I see in myself in what's out there that I need to find. It kind of subverts judgment though. It doesn't really have the same sort of feeling as what we're talking about. So I agree that that card in that place with the other two is a little confusing. And as I'll kind of emphasize again later, or wanted to emphasize later, that in a case like this, you might keep like puzzling it over, thinking about what it could mean, or how is lovers a judgment, and just kind of holding that question, or challenging yourself to play with that concept in the writing of the scene and see what happens. Also, as we go through these tarot spreads, you're getting so much information. And so focus on the things that are really like opening doors for you that seem like, oh, this is big, this is really helpful. But for the things that are still like not really clicking into place, sometimes we're meant to just pick up on like the stuff that really rises to the top for us. So I would keep that one, like put a flag on that one and come back to it. And I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Right
No,
now.
that's a great answer. Thank you.
Any other burning questions before we continue? Okay. Again, add them to the chat. And I would like us to take some time, we have 30 minutes of class remaining. I would like to take some time for us to try writing this scene that is indicated or suggested by the 3 cards that you just pulled. So when Janet Burroway is talking about incorporating emotion, logic, and judgment into a scene through the character's speech, through the character's thoughts, or whatever access we have to their thoughts, through the way that they move their body, through the decisions that they make, we can, through the enactment of all those different things, we can reveal the character's emotion, logic, and judgment in relation to the theme. So this is a challenge to try and write a theme, either where you can just focus on the emotion part, you can just focus on the logic part, you can just focus on the judgment part if you want. If 2 of the cards, like in Cat, in your case, the Knight of Cups and the Seven of Cups seem like the ones that make a lot of sense. And so you give yourself an easier time and still a challenge trying to like weave those 2 into a scene. And if you want to go really big, you can try to reveal the logic, the judgment, and the emotion in your scene. It's up to you. So you can choose 1, you could choose 2, you could choose 3.
And should this scene incorporate the theme that we're working with as well?
Yeah, so you want to show, and the theme again can be like so background that maybe it's not even fully, like just in reading the scene, it may not automatically leap out to someone what the theme is. You hope there's some detection of it, or we get some hint of it. That's the point of the exercise. But yes, try to hold that theme in the background. And what you're trying to bring into the foreground is the animation of that theme through the character's perspective, through their emotions, logic, and or judgment, it's a lot of layers. I told it was new moon in Pisces. It's complicated, it's complex, it's nuanced. But does that make sense? And are there other questions?
Hey, Cecily, I had a question, just trying to wrap my head around like how emotion, logic, and judgment work together. Is it fair to say that they sort of are like a formula? Like, as I was sorting out my thoughts, I was like, emotion is, you know, your past experience and how you think about things. Logic are the conclusions you draw from observation. And then judgment is sort of, you know, how that emotion in your past and your lived experience cast a filter on your observations, so you're drawing conclusions.
Yes, I think that is accurate. I think with the emotion part, you know, you mentioned the past, and I think we can have an emotional reaction to the present and the situation in front of us, but yeah, they are all connected, because if we see, like in my cutie pie version, like the character has a natural uninhibited emotion when he sees cutie pie. Like there's something that's like exciting and sparks for him, that like that's like the part of him that seeks love, and the part of like every human that finds excitement in the idea of like connection and love. But then his thoughts come in to tell him like he's already made up a story about what love is like, how love is impossible for him, and love is a joke, and love is an illusion. And so as soon as he has this feeling, his mind comes in to bring some logic and some judgment simultaneously, and to squash that emotion, and instead produce in him an emotion of like resignation and numbness and hopelessness, let's say. So there's like a miasma of like emotion, logic, judgment back to a different emotion. And with every human, also in a Piscean way, there's this tremendous flow that's going on, and this exchange and this confluence. And so your thoughts give you certain kinds of feelings. Like if you see something and you decide to think a certain thing about it, it will produce a kind of emotion in you that may be related to your past, probably. And also, if it's a story that you've carried for a while, then it will most likely have judgments too. And there's, you know, judgments come in, they can be very short and very small and very subtle, like by one word being placed in a line of dialogue that provides a little bit of a value judgment. So it's very hard to like map it out, because it's really confusing, and your character is going to move through these different things at a different pace and combination in different scenes. And so it's like, and Janet Burroway talks about this, it's like, I can't, she's like, I can't explain to you how you do this. And I haven't even figured it really out myself, except that she knows that these are the pieces that come to play. So it's kind of like the conundrum and the paradox of working with the theme. It's like, we understand this concept of love, but how we illustrate it in a really particular character perspective is complicated. And there is no formula for that. Right?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So this is an experiment. This is a challenging experiment. It's probably like, that's the hard work of being a writer, is trying to not tell the reader, hey, this is a story about love and believing in love and not being resigned to hopelessness. You're never going to tell your reader that. You're going to show them through the events and the actions and the thoughts and the feelings of your characters, which is why novels take so long. They're not just a sentence. Okay, do y'all feel ready to try it? All right, so it is 9:08. Let's go for 12 minutes. Put some questions in the chat to me if you get stuck. If anything is unclear. Start small if that's easier for you. About 3 more minutes. Okay, we will wrap up in about 30 seconds. Please to pause. Okay. How did that feel? You probably got started on a scene, but not completed with one, or that is what happened for me. Is there anyone who would be willing to share a little of their experience trying to write the scene, or possibly even read a little bit of it?
I can talk about my experience for sure. I stuck with the emotion. I was working with Flower of, what is it? Those are all different. Queen of Pentacles.
What was
And
tell us your theme?
I was sort of like going with the acceptance, steadiness.
Queen of Pentacles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was working with the Page of Wands for the emotion card.
Okay.
And it actually kind of catapulted me into a scene in the third section of my book that I'm nowhere near writing, but I'm really excited to get to. Like I feel myself really wanting to be in that part of the book. And I haven't let myself like jump ahead at all. And so this was a really nice excuse to like kind of go where my brain is and where the energy feels like it is while I'm kind of like working through things that feel like I just have to do this in order to get to the good stuff.
Cool. Yeah. I do like how this kind of pulls you into a particular place, and it may not be the one where you already are. It may be one you've already written. It may be one that's like further into the future. And I think we all come into the writing process with like a certain kind of like structure or system that gives us more comfort. We don't want to let ourselves start drafting this third part until we finish the second, or we're just going to make a mess, or it's going to get too complicated. But that recursive aspect of the writing process means, if we let ourselves go into like a future point in time in the book, or the part that we haven't written yet, we may make discoveries there that help you build the bridge to get to that place, or to find the connections you need when you're revising. So good for you letting yourself go into that future. And I'm glad, like hopefully that opened a little bit for you. Cool. Anyone else who would care to share their experience trying to write this, whether it was interesting, it was like troubling, or anything your character said or did in the scene that you like or that interests you?
I'll just say that I found it really kind of helpful for framing sort of these like crucial types of conversations that I ended up writing like a dialogue scene, but I think like having that frame of like emotion, logic, judgment, like with the cards really helped me kind of like, I can see how to like fine tune those big moments better and to be more powerful too.
Good. Yeah, I think especially when you're in a revising phase, or if you're looking at a scene that feels kind of flat or not like it's doing the work that you want it to do, you can come back to it and sort of ask, like, where is the emotion here, and where can I find it? What lines are actually pointing to it? Where is the logic? Where is the judgment? And is there enough of everything or a lack of something? And are those judgments, like, is the judgment, logic, and emotion, I'm not saying they all have to be like in the same energy or package, but they at least need to like make sense together given your character. So it does provide a good framework for like looking back at something and trying to figure out what may be missing or what you could use more of, because those filters in our characters are really the key to so much. Thank you for sharing that, Brooke. Anyone else?
I think this was really interesting, and I had a hard time getting started with it because I didn't kind of know where to go with it, but it gave me an idea. I was kind of stuck with a portion of the story, and it gave me an idea to kind of introduce another character with a different storyline that really helps tie things together. And it's just, so that's kind of fun to explore.
Okay, cool. Very cool. I had my character scrolling. She's like scrolling through some video. I don't know how she got the video, but she sees there needs to be someone in my story who's like an official type, who's like kind of suspicious that they're up to something. And I think what's going on in the scene is like maybe some animals have mysteriously died. So it's a question of like who in the community is like poisoning the animals. And she finds a video of this like constable like setting these traps. And she like gets really judgmental of him, and she gets really mad, and she starts having like all these like revenge fantasies about what kind of punishment he could get. And she takes it to her partner, and once her partner hears like who's the culprit, her partner's like, oh well, that makes things easy, we'll just like throw him in a healing circle and like figure this out. And this is the thing that suddenly makes her afraid, because she's never really like confronted a problem, I think, head on, even though she has a lot of like magical prowess. And so and I talked about the cards that I had, there was all this self-doubt. And I think seeing her partner's like sense of ease and confidence around it, and the fact that like she wasn't thinking any of that, she was just thinking of like punishment and like cruelty. And so suddenly she realizes like, oh, something is off on me, like something is inconsistent here and I'm missing something. And so I hadn't gotten all the way into the scene with that, but it does create an interesting challenge to play with as a writer. And I think it also pushes you to really focus on the emotion, the logic, and the judgment at the forefront, which will help a scene fill out in a much better, fuller way. So you can try this with, so let's see, where were we? Yes, you can repeat this spread, of course, for other themes if you want to go back and look at some of the other ones, but I would encourage you to go slowly and let each of these processes, I would go through like a scene writing process, let that sink in for a little bit. I would not overwhelm yourself with too much theme information because it's just so heady. And I was talking, as I was saying, with Kat and like the lover's card, the mysterious lover's card as a judgment. Sometimes you'll see things where you're just like, I don't know how this fits. It's not working for me. I don't know. And don't feel like you're supposed to accommodate everything. When you feel a strong connection to something or like, wow, cool idea, I'm excited about this. Like that's kind of, I'll do a tarot reading for someone for an hour and not everything we talk about is going to stay with them, but like one or two things will really make sense and like sit with them on a deeper level. And that's going to happen for you when you're pulling cards for yourself in this context. So focus on the things that are jumping into your space and feel like helpful companions, and don't work too hard to do like craft acrobatics or mental acrobatics to try and accommodate every little bit of the story. So just keep that in mind. And a few final thoughts, as I have mentioned, but I'll say it again, theme is huge, it's confounding, but it's why you want to make art about it in the first place. So have a curious relationship with it. Let yourself, because theme is so expansive, let yourself be expanded by it. Come into the exploration with an expansive frame of mind. And remember that it's the writing that is part of your exploration, like not just pulling tarot cards and taking notes or like thinking and daydreaming and dreaming, all of those things are part of the exploration too, but so is the writing, more than as much as, I think it's like the writing and then all those other things lumped together are like equal parts, part of the exploration. You will notice as we finish like the content part of this class that we did not even talk about plot. And plot is obviously a big part of a story, but I would argue that plot is driven by your characters and the things that they want and the way they interact with the world. And so now that you've gone deeper into theme and character and world building, I want to believe, and I feel somewhat confident that plot points will become easier to discern and to imagine now that you know your characters better and now that you know their world better. But maybe we'll do a whole class on like tarot for the plot and the structure of your novel. If that's something you would be interested in, put some kind of symbol in the chat. And then as we start to close up, where do you feel anxious, confused, or daunted? Where do you feel excited? Or let me ask, are there remaining places of confusion and dauntingness? Excited about the expansiveness and always a little anxious about holding all of it. Yes, this is like the paradox of the theme of also being alive. Like there's so much possibility, but how can we navigate through it? Yes, very well put, Gemma. Are there confusions or anxieties that I may be able to help with? I start getting into it, then it's like, this won't ever be good enough. Yes. Okay. This is where the coaching sessions will hopefully come in. And that's a thing. That's one of the things I think many writers grapple with. And part of what I would encourage you to do is like notice when that thought is coming up and trying to go to like, okay, I'm having this thought. What is, like, close your eyes, be with the thought, go into that feeling of not being good enough and keep kind of asking like, why this story? What is it here to do for me? We'll do more around this in coaching, but notice those thoughts, especially as you get ready for a coaching session. What's getting in your way so that I can help and support with that. And your writing will be good enough. That never let, the more you write, the more you know how to write. I'm excited about using this spread and thinking about combining and checking for emotion, logic, judgment, trifecta. Great. Excited by the sense of being on the right track and close to the end. Congratulations, Carrie, at least of the first draft. Anxious about whether what I perceive in this story will translate and be accessible to the readers. Okay. Yeah. That's not something you have to worry about right away. Just remember that you're trying to get through the construction of the story right now, and you'll get to reread it again, and you can share it with other people to explore that question. Excited about looking for places where this new theme is already there and waiting for me to see it. Yes, now that you're thinking about this, as you go back through the story, you might see little opportunities to turn up the volume, bring in an emotion, bring in a judgment, bring in some logic. I'd be interested in maybe a structure class. Cool. Take a minute really quick. How much time do we have? Yeah, we have a minute. For your own purposes, what has become more clear to you about your themes? What are you glad to see and know? And write one or two things on the right side. What would a reasonable next step look like given what you discovered today? And of course, at the bottom, as is our tradition, write a little note of gratitude to yourself for something that you've done in these last 2 hours. And I'll give you 3 minutes to jot down a few things. Oh, we've already gone over. I'm sorry. Maybe it's because I'm in a different time zone. I can't track these things. You know how to complete this and fill this out. So you've gotten a few minutes to get started. I want to leave you with a little assignment for next time. So we're meeting one more time. It's going to be on Tuesday next week, not Wednesday. But at the same time, 6:30 to 8:30. And we're going to use that time to make a plan to address any final questions. Maybe we can start to talk about some plotting and structure issues. But before that class, I encourage you to read through your notes from the first 3 classes and take one more step, which could be like trying a short spread, pulling a card, giving yourself some writing time. And then write down 3 areas of your story that you want to tend to and bring those to the next class. So that could be like figuring out my order of operations, like the next 3 things I want to tackle, or the next 3 scenes, or I still don't understand what the climax is going to be. Whatever the case may be that you feel like your story needs, write down a few of those things and bring them to class next time. And that is all. So sorry for going over a few minutes, and thank you for being here. I will stay on for a second if anyone has any final questions, and so good to see you tonight. Have a great rest of your week. Yes, take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.